What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so this is the situation we have right here. A lot has happened since the last update I have made, so we're going to go over this as quickly as possible. Before we do, we need to actually go back to the last 90 frames just to explain what's been going on with this. So the last 90 frames, as you can see, there's not that much storm activity, but pay attention to this part right here, because on my video, this thing was kind of starting to develop, and then this thing really started exploding after the video went out last night, and it's not been stopping since. And this thing is continuing to develop, like more storm activity, more convection is developing. That, like, we're looking at minus 80 cloud tops in a lot of this, and this thing looks also a lot more organized now than it did basically 12 hours ago. So we're going to have to pay attention to this as time goes on. So yeah, this thing is rapidly developing, rapidly organizing, and we have the NHCs right here. You can see it. We now have a 90% chance of development, ladies and gentlemen. 70% in the next 48 hours. Just for a recap, 12 hours ago, it was at 40 and 70. 40% in the next 48 hours, 70% in the next 5 days. So this thing is reflected by the NHC's advisory right here. Recent satellite images indicate that the coverage and organization of shower and thunderstorm activity has increased significantly overnight in association with an area of low pressure located several hundred miles southwest of the southwestern coast of Mexico. Environmental conditions appear conducive for further development, and a tropical depression is likely to form over the central part of the North Pacific Basin today or tomorrow, while the system moves generally westward at 15 to 20 miles per hour. So yeah, this thing could be a tropical depression by this afternoon. That's how fast this thing's developing. Now, how strong is it going to get? It'll depend on a couple of things. It'll depend on the wind shear and the area, and it'll depend on the waters. Because right now, if we're taking a look at it, it's still over pretty warm waters right here. However, it's not going to last like 5 days like it did with Bonnie. It's probably going to last more like 2 or 3 days. So depending on how quickly this organizes and how this develops and how the storm activity and how the convection starts to kind of wrap around itself, that will depend on how strong this gets. And if it does it quickly, I don't know. We could see strong tropical storm, maybe even weak hurricane status. But that's basically the worst case scenario we're looking at this point. The intensity models, the H-Wharf has us going up to a minimal hurricane right here, just right on the cusp of it, right, ladies and gentlemen. All the models agree that this thing is going to be a tropical storm at some point. Now, is hurricane off the table? No, it's not. Considering how quickly this thing's developing, and right now, if it continues its rapid development, and if it starts to organize and it starts to intensify, then we could be talking about that. But in my opinion at this point, considering how well this thing's organized, and considering how much better this has developed, my range of how this thing's going to intensify, I'm going to have to go with around, for just a little bit right here, I'm going to go 60 to 80 miles per hour, and the majority of the models have this thing capping as either at or above 50 knots, which is about 60 miles per hour, and that's what I'm basing my estimate off of. So once again, 60 to 80 miles per hour is my estimate, and it is subject to change. Now, if we take a look at the track models right here, it actually gets interesting right here, because the track models are pretty much in unison for the next 48 hours, and then it starts deviating. Some of them moving due west, like they all split off. Some move it to the west, some move it to the west-northwest. Majority of plurality concentrate right here. And some of it moving further to the north, which if that's the case, it could move into those cooler waters quicker than expected. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and go to the models right here. We have the latest and best models right here. Let's go ahead and go to the HMON right here. This is the first model we're going over. Then we're going over the CMC, then the GFS, then the H-Wharf. The HMON has this thing kind of developing in the next 2 days right here, but considering how fast this thing's is developing, this thing could develop by this afternoon to a tropical depression and potentially a storm by tonight if the organization is good. But this thing does have this thing strengthening to a stronger tropical storm around 50 to 60 miles per hour, and then it kind of like weakens as it moves into the cooler waters, which is understandable right there. Something to pay attention to, But that's it. That's one model run right there. Invest 95E for the CMC. This is where things get interesting because the H-Mon is generally not the most conservative model. It's usually this one, but this one actually goes up a bit. It has it taking it to strong tropical storm status, and basically we're looking at some winds at least flight level around hurricane force. But I don't think it's going to reach the ground at that point. It's probably going to get up to 70 miles per hour in this estimation right here, but nothing above that. And then this thing kind of stagnates and slowly weakens as time goes on, and then it basically dissipates, and that's the last we'll hear of it. Now, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the GFS, because this is a very interesting run right here. And, okay, this is the 12Z, it's not ready. The 6Z we're going to use. And this thing kind of develops. It takes its time developing. The CMC, though, I want to go back and just show you how quickly this thing's developing, just to give you an understanding. Like, this thing could develop if the CMC is the correct model, but potentially by tomorrow, but like not tomorrow, but potentially by this afternoon. That's how quickly the CMC is estimating this thing's going to develop. GFS is a different story. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. The GFS, this thing takes potentially takes 2 to 3 days to develop. Right there, ladies and gentlemen. 2 to 3 days. Okay, what's going on with this thing? All right, there we go. That's better. Yeah, this thing takes 2 to 3 days to develop, 48 hours, but after it develops, it starts strengthening, and we're looking at potential hurricane strength right here. Do I think it's going to be a 85 mile per hour, 80 to 85 mile per hour hurricane? No. I think it's going to get up to maybe 80, but that's the absolute cap. That's where it would cut off right there, considering all the conditions and everything. So this thing develops, it starts weakening, and then it approaches the Hawaiian Islands, moves north of there. The GFS had it last time we talked about this, had this making landfall on several Hawaiian Islands, please excuse me. But considering that this is a week out, and there's a lot of cold water around Hawaii, if we take a look at this, like, we're looking at cold waters potentially. If we take a look at this, although the waters are warmer than average in this area, like we're looking at waters like 24, 22 degrees Celsius. Like that's below the 80-degree threshold if you convert that. So this thing is not going to be strengthening at the Hawaiian Islands. It's not going to happen unless like the Hawaiian Islands see like a 10+ degree Celsius above average situation, which at this point, unless we see a massive climate shift, is not going to happen. Now, the H-Wharf is another interesting take on this. If we take a look at the H-Wharf, the 12Z is starting to come in, but we're going to go ahead and, look, for this scenario, use the 6Z. This thing has this thing developing right away. And it starts developing by 4 o'clock. It's already a tropical storm, which I think that's a bit early for that, but it's not off the table. And then this thing starts to kind of organize itself, develop, and then it starts strengthening into a hurricane right here. Bottoms out around 980 millibars right here, 981 to be exact. And the max winds are around at 850 or 90 knots, which would equivalent to around 85 to 90 mile per hour hurricane. I don't think that's going to happen at this point unless this thing really just ramps up in its organization and ramps up in its intensity. But we'll have to pay attention to it nevertheless. This thing stagnates, it starts weakening. It actually weakens slower than the rest of the models, but still a situation to pay attention to nevertheless. But with that being said, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps me out, helps make more videos like these. The goal of this channel is to get more people engaged with weather. But with that being said, guys, have a wonderful day. Stay safe.